King Harris didn't just collapse in that courtroom, he shattered the illusion of hip-hop royalty right in front of flashing cameras, reporters, and stunned fans. Imagine the scene. The son of T.I., the self-proclaimed king of the South, standing before a judge with all the arrogance and bravado of fame dripping off him, only for the gavel to fall like a thunderclap, sealing his fate. 5 years, not 5 months, not probation, 5 brutal years in prison. The courtroom went silent, the tension thicker than any beat T.I. ever produced, and the whispers that followed carried further than any diss track. And the collapse? Oh, it wasn't just King hitting the floor. It was an empire beginning to fracture in real time, a dynasty exposed to the harsh glare of public scrutiny, with cameras capturing every moment as though the world was watching a live execution of legacy and ambition. But what really happened that day? Was it simply the recklessness of a 20-year-old with fame, privilege, and entitlement? Or was it something far more calculated, a deliberate message aimed at T.I., at Atlanta, and at an entire culture that had long believed it was untouchable? Some say the courtroom was just the final act in a drama years in the making, but others whisper of backroom deals, anonymous tips, and orchestrated power plays that had been quietly unfolding long before the cameras arrived. Sources suggest the entire collapse may have been carefully scripted. Every moment, every reaction, even the timing of the press being on site could have been manipulated for maximum impact. King Harris didn't just stumble into legal trouble, he ran headfirst toward it, and in doing so, he became the lightning rod for forces far beyond his own control. While the public saw a reckless kid getting his comeuppance, those closer to the story suggest that King's fall was also about demonstrating that no one, not even the son of a mogul who had survived federal charges, industry feuds, and decades of scandal, was above the law. The whispers ask a chilling question. Was King punished for his choices, or was he sacrificed to send a message to the rest of the empire? King Harris didn't stumble into fame accidentally. He was born into it, raised on red carpets, and groomed in the shadow of one of hip-hop's most powerful figures. T.I. had built a brand on resilience, on turning scandal into empire building. And King, he grew up thinking he inherited that invincibility, the belief that a name, a legacy, or a few hundred flashing cameras could shield him from consequences. But the time he reached adulthood, King wasn't just the son of T.I. He was an independent character in the narrative of hip-hop royalty, a figure whose social media presence alone seemed to generate headlines daily. Yet that fame and confidence carried a dangerous mix of arrogance and recklessness. Instagram lives filled with stacks of cash, private jets, luxury cars, and nights of chaos were treated by fans as proof of untouchability. But insiders knew that behind the scenes, his family had long attempted to curb his impulses, to rein in a young man who seemed determined to prove he wasn't just the heir to his father's empire, but untouchable in his own right. Those warnings, however, went largely ignored. And when the gavel fell, it wasn't just the law speaking, it was a reckoning for the illusion King had built around himself. This downfall wasn't spontaneous. It was a slow-burn scandal that had been escalating for years, fueled by social media braggadocio, viral nightclub incidents, and public meltdowns. Each Instagram post showing stacks of cash, each clip of King mocking the police or flaunting designer brands, each nightclub intercation, these weren't mere coincidences. They were signals, whether intentional or not, that the young man believed he was untouchable. Friends and family reportedly pleaded with him to slow down, to recognize that fame can be as dangerous as it is intoxicating. But King thrived on defiance. To him, controversy wasn't a problem. It was an affirmation of power. He wanted to step out of his father's shadow, but in doing so, he failed to understand that stepping into the spotlight in Atlanta's volatile hip-hop scene meant every action had consequences. By the time he stood before the judge, the narrative had already been written by years of reckless behavior, social media displays, and public perception. The untouchable prince was about to be reminded that no dynasty is immune to collapse. The courtroom was packed with reporters, bloggers, and industry insiders, all eager to witness what would soon be an iconic moment in hip-hop history. When the judge read the sentence, 5 years, the room froze. Witnesses later described the air as almost physical, heavy with disbelief and tension. King Harris, the kid who had once flaunted untouchability as a birthright, literally collapsed. Shoulders slumped, knees buckled, eyes wide open with shock. For a fleeting moment, the world saw not T.I.'s son, not a prince of hip-hop, but a 20-year-old facing the full weight of the law. And while the public may have viewed this as the fall of a single young man, insiders understood it differently. They recognized it as a moment that symbolized something much larger, the vulnerability of an empire that had, until now, seemed invincible. But this story doesn't end with King alone. Anonymous sources suggest that law enforcement had been monitoring him for months before the arrest, tracking his movements, tapping phones, and embedding informants in his circle. Some insiders claim the objective wasn't just to punish King, it was to send a clear message to him, to T.I., and to Atlanta's broader hip-hop scene. The timing of media presence, the viral moments captured for social media, and the subsequent online frenzy seemed too orchestrated to be mere coincidence. This wasn't just about justice, it was theater, a carefully staged spectacle meant to humiliate, destabilize, and warn. And the impact? Explosive. Social media erupted almost immediately. Hashtags like setup and T.I. exposed trended. Memes circulated of King in handcuffs juxtaposed against T.I. wearing a crown, captioned "King of the South" to "Prison King." Public opinion split. Fans argued online over sympathy versus accountability, while insiders watched as the real fallout began behind closed doors.
T.I., who had survived federal gun charges, feuds with industry titans, and countless tabloid storms, now found himself powerless, forced to witness his son crumble under a sentence even his vast influence could not reverse. According to eyewitnesses, T.I. appeared pale and shaken, sweat dripping from his forehead as the gavel fell. The man who had built an empire on comebacks and resilience suddenly seemed incapable of action. And while King faced the immediate consequences of his actions, T.I. was confronted with something far larger, the potential unraveling of the empire he had spent decades constructing. Deals, endorsements, and industry partnerships that had once been guaranteed began to wobble. Connections that had survived scandals, rumors, and court battles suddenly became fragile. The Harris family's legacy, its wealth, influence, and dominance in Atlanta's hip-hop scene, was exposed to unprecedented scrutiny. Insiders suggest that King Harris was never meant to be the primary target. He was bait, a pawn designed to test the resilience of a larger dynasty. Leaked documents and anonymous testimonies hinted that prosecutors and law enforcement had a long-term plan, one that extended far beyond a single court case. The strategy, some allege, was to destabilize the Harris empire, to provoke internal chaos, and to uncover vulnerabilities that could expose more significant figures, including T.I. himself. If true, the gavel that sentenced King to 5 years was less a punishment for misbehavior and more a calculated warning shot, a public spectacle meant to demonstrate that even the children of kings are not beyond reach. The courtroom collapse, the viral social media frenzy, the memes and debates, they all served a single purpose: to remind the world that no dynasty is invincible. Of course, the internet did what the internet does best. TikTok detectives began piecing together alleged conspiracies, YouTube channels produced hour-long exposés dissecting every clip of King Harris, and Twitter erupted in debates over hashtags like #TIExposed and #FreeKing. Fans created memes side by side of King in handcuffs and T.I. with a crown, while some users speculated about whether the fall of King might be the first chapter in a much larger takedown. Beyond the digital frenzy, the real-life fallout was immediate. Business partners reportedly pulled back, deals were delayed indefinitely, and endorsements that had been lined up vanished without explanation. Industry insiders described a sense of panic that spread like wildfire. If King Harris's collapse was just the beginning, everyone connected to the Harris empire risked being caught in the fallout. The stakes were suddenly enormous, and the line between legal consequences and public spectacle had blurred entirely.
The clash wasn't just professional, it was personal. Inside the Harris household, sources report arguments erupted almost immediately after the sentencing. Tiny allegedly begged T.I. to fight, tooth and nail, for their son's freedom, but T.I. hesitated, caught between protecting his child and preserving the empire he had built. The tension was not simply about parental love, it was about strategy, survival, and damage control. Every choice carried weight. Fight too hard, and the court of public opinion could swing further against them. Do nothing, and the dynasty could be irreparably damaged. And while the world watched memes, news clips, and social media debates, the family struggled with a real-life chess game where every move was scrutinized and every misstep could be fatal. And then there were the whispers, the unverified leaks that spread like wildfire. Alleged audio recordings, secret witness lists, and hints of financial misconduct suggested that the collapse of King Harris was merely the opening act. Names larger than King's, ranging from promoters to former managers, even other industry heavyweights, were rumored to be involved in sealed investigations. Anonymous sources claimed these individuals were prepared to testify if called upon, potentially implicating T.I. or his associates in financial or legal improprieties. Whether true or fabricated, the speculation fueled panic. Social media users, bloggers, and journalists latched on to the narrative, spinning stories of a dynasty on the brink of destruction, and the perception of inevitable collapse became almost as dangerous as any legal action itself. If King Harris was the pawn, then T.I. may have been the true king under threat. Analysts and insiders suggest the 5-year sentence was a warning, a carefully orchestrated move to rattle the empire and test its foundations. Leaked documents, unverified but tantalizing enough to go viral, pointed to offshore accounts, shell companies, and hidden financial dealings that could be exploited if investigators chose to act. The social media fallout, the memes, the public debate, it was all part of a narrative that had already begun shaping public perception. King's collapse wasn't the climax, it was the spark. The real fire was waiting behind the scenes, threatening to consume everything the Harris family had built. The image that haunts people is simple yet devastating. T.I., pale and sweating, watching his son sentenced, the man who once turned every scandal into a comeback, now powerless in the courtroom. Online, the narrative was immediate: the fall of a dynasty. Whether King Harris was reckless, entitled, or simply unlucky, the larger story was unmistakable. Leaks hinted at financial misconduct, secret witnesses, and a potential federal purge. And the city of Atlanta, the internet, and the music industry were all left wondering, if King was just the pawn, who is the king they are truly after? And if T.I. is the next target, the consequences could reshape Atlanta's hip-hop scene forever.